Well, hi everybody, it's T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, I know I've said this now for the start of the last 3 calls, but today, hopefully, we will be able to finish up our discussion on emotional intelligence. And last time around, we talked about, I think we got to 3 of these core competencies that Genos has mapped out. And we left off with authenticity. So we're going to begin with emotional reasoning. I'm going to go ahead and chat over to everybody. So to panelists and attendees, here is your link to the page that I am reading from as we do this. I find this next one to be particularly interesting, and a little bit of a quiz will be occurring as far as your command of all things ChangeGrid related. So that's your little heads up, but here goes. So emotional reasoning is the next one. Emotional reasoning is about using the information in feelings from oneself and others when decision making. It involves considering your own and others' feelings when making decisions, combining the information in feelings with facts and technical information. Wow, this is a long sentence. And communicating this decision-making process to others. Feelings and emotions contain important information. For example, the level of commitment colleagues demonstrate often provides insights into whether a decision is going to be supported. The emotional appeal of products and services often provides insights into selling and marketing messages. When this type of emotional information is combined with facts and technical information, people make expansive, creative, and well thought out decisions. Conversely, people who do not use emotional information and focus on facts or technical information only tend to be limited in their decision making. I have a lot of thoughts about this subject, but I'll open it up to you guys. So first of all, do you think that factoring in emotions when you're making decisions is always a good thing, sometimes a good thing? Under what circumstances could it be good, bad, right, wrong? So how would you actually kind of characterize the impact that emotions have in quality decision making? As they all rush to unmute their microphones.
Oh, depends where you're on the grid, right?
Depends where you are on the change grid. And so we'll take a look at the change grid in just a second, but I wanted you guys just kind of think about this. When we talk about reasoning, reasoning is about how we go about figuring something out. And ultimately, whether we follow through or not is a different question. But as far as coming up with whatever decision we come up with, this is the result of whatever reasoning we used. Now, in your basic training in change management, tension management, you know that as we look at the core characteristics of these 5 levels of tension, we know one of those characteristics is that as we move further up grid or further down grid, as we move away from the heart line, the center of the change grid, in either direction, up or down, reasoning abilities become increasingly emotionally ruled. At a certain point in time, logic, facts, figures, technical information is completely tossed aside or is inaccessible to that individual based on where they happen to be mentally at that point in time. And if Brian was on the call, he could tell us what was going on as far as the neurotransmitters that could be minimizing someone's ability to recognize and tap into that kind of information. So we know that if you're way up in the upgrade danger zone, this is emotionally ruled reasoning abilities. And if we're too far down grid, we know we're also looking at emotionally ruled reasoning abilities. Different sets of emotions, upgrid and downgrid, but nevertheless emotions that are ruling someone's decision making. What I was saying was that very far upgrid and very far downgrid, reasoning abilities become increasingly emotionally ruled until at the extremes, they are, I'm going to say, almost exclusively emotionally ruled. So let's see if we can come up with some examples to give evidence to this. If you are in the upgrid danger zone, you are in a situation where you perceive your ability as being next to nothing, maybe nothing, and you are in a life and death challenge of a situation, 10, 11, 12 up there. You're in this upgrade danger zone. Tell me what the emotions are that you are likely to be experiencing.
Fear.
Fear is the number one. So fear. Now, does fear tend to clarify or distort reality?
Well, I would say it probably distorts reality because you're so focused on what's at hand right in front of you, you're not seeing, you've lost your peripheral vision.
Exactly right. And so now, so fear can definitely distort the reality, and for good reason. If you are in a life or death situation, you know, if that, I always said it as a joke, but I was trying to illustrate a true point. If the building is on fire, we do not form a committee to study it. So you get out of the building. So this is what we're really talking about. That fear is designed to trigger you. Again, Brian could tell us exactly which neurotransmitters are coming into play, but most definitely we are in survival mode, and whatever's going on inside of our brain is triggering us to just get out of whatever that situation happens to be. Now, there are other emotions we encounter upgrid, but not necessarily this far upgrade. So the characteristic or the hallmark emotions of stress were anger, grief, fear, and shame. Um, Anger also appears outgrid. Shame occurs at all four danger zones. Grief is not that far upgrid, but grief is about the loss of something that you really value. It's not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of a good client or the loss of some object that you held near and dear. There's lots of things that could trigger a grief response in us, but generally that's going to occur at a lower level of tension, still upgrid, but a lower level of tension. So we're really talking about at this level, the fear that could be coming up there is probably the biggest one. Anger is definitely one that could be greatly distorting things, and grief. So tell me how you think fear, anger, and grief are helping your reasoning. Obviously, Boris has already just said it's not. If anything, it's causing you to have blinders on, tunnel vision. And so I don't know anyone in the world of Genos, but I would say to them, perhaps certain emotions and certain feelings should be factored in, where other emotions and feelings could probably be giant warning signs that now is not the time to be discussing whatever it is that's being discussed. That anger, that fear, that grief that certain people sitting around that conference table might be experiencing needs to be dealt with first and perhaps separately so that we can have the energy to go about and make the right sorts of decision. Now I'm going to pull Boris in on this to give us an example. So heads up, Boris, something's coming your way.
Okay.
But you know, he works with companies that are in distress. Well, imagine what the emotional state is of those stakeholders when they're sitting around a conference table talking about their business's predicament. Do you believe that their anger and all that is actually going to be useful? How are we going to get rid of it? I mean, I want to make sure you guys understand I'm talking about a real thing. We can't just say that emotions and feelings should always be factored in to whatever decisions we're making. Sometimes they cause more harm than good. So Boris, I'll throw it to you. Any thoughts about the role of those very high upgrade emotions in the kinds of
Sure.
clients you work with? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, typically what you find is entrepreneurs and CEOs of companies are type A type personalities, right? So they're already very hard charging individuals. And so when they get into this state, they become what I call the bull in the china shop.
Yeah.
They start bumping into every person on their leadership team. They're frustrated with why people are not engaged. And they really are having a very difficult time dealing with this. But what I often find is another dynamic that occurs is if that individual has had a history of other problems, i.e., drug or alcohol abuse, or any kind of substance, or any kind of negative self-destructive behavior, that is going to come out.
Mhm.
That tends to be part of the dynamic.
Mhm.
and they start doing things out of desperation without really thinking it through, and really exacerbating their problem.
Exactly right. And, if we talk about decision making for a second, usually we would say that one of the hallmarks of power is proactive decision making. But as we move past that danger zone, suddenly the decision making becomes reactive yet again. And so I think that Boris is absolutely right. We could see this person who's normally a hard driving, entrepreneurial kind of type, tends to live out grid anyway, doesn't take too much to push them into the danger zone. But the moment they're in this danger zone, don't be surprised to see a whole lot of upgrid sorts of stuff come out as well. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, remember that all four of these red dots are in fact the exact same red dot. It's just kind of like as the South Pole. So the center of the change grid is the North Pole. These red circles all coming together at the bottom would be the South Pole. And so all this danger zone ick that occurs at all four extremes are actually neighbors with one another. So it's not at all surprising to see this. Now, Boris also brought up that their substance abuse behaviors might come into play. Well, for certain substances will definitely move you up grid. Some substance will actually move you out grid, but a great many of the drugs that people turn to are actually downgrid maneuvers. They're going to reduce activity in the central nervous system. And so that would start to awaken a lot of this downgrid kind of stuff. So how often have large companies, and Boris, again, I'm sure you got examples for us for this, you need to make some decisions, but because this decision maker is so overwhelmed by everything that's going on, they've pretty much withdrawn and disappeared.
Mhm.
So does this happen, or do they escape whatever the moment is by turning to whatever their alcohol or drug of choice happens to be?
I think what happens more often is not that they necessarily escape, but they, because they are the bull in the china shop and they're disenfranchising some of their leadership team, people on the leadership team get very, very nervous about their own security and how
Yes.
they interact with that individual. And they kind of step back, they get disengaged. Uh, and so the problem starts to exacerbate itself throughout the whole leadership team of the organization.
Mhm.
Instead of coming together as a team, they fall apart. And you see people looking for new roles in other companies and looking for an exit and all kinds of stuff. And oftentimes the CEO is not in a position where he has that opportunity, right? He's being looked at. His only choice is to stand and fight, but he feels he's incapable. That could be a real big challenge. And oftentimes that's where you see CEOs being forced out by a board or by other investors because they realize they're just not able to handle the situation.
Exactly. And that, again, very well illustrates the point which we want to make here about emotional reasoning. Certain emotions are highly destructive
Mhm.
and can cause tremendous damage. I'm very curious to know from your opinion, everyone else chime in on this as well. What emotions do you think should be factored in when you are putting together the right answer, the right solution? So I don't want to say all emotions are always damaging. So are there some emotions that are actually useful, that help to clarify reality for what it is? So talk a little bit about what emotions are not necessarily problematic.
Um, I think emotions that relate to introspection, emotions that they can be very self-serving, because if somebody is open-minded enough to understand that they don't know what they don't know in the situation, and that they are willing to focus on what they have in their control as opposed to what's being forced upon them. I think the emotions tied to that are the most useful to that individual. And so somebody being able to uh, be in good mental clarity, right? In a good mindset, somebody that is calm and collected, an individual that maybe is focused on actually their health and making sure that they're not being distracted by personal health challenges and things, that stress that's causing them problems. That brings them, I think, to a place where they can experience those helpful emotions as opposed to going out grid or, you know.
Yep. Now, what Boris has just described are the emotions that we would find closer to power and closer to the center of the change grid. And so we want people to come to it feeling confident, feeling positive, feeling that there's a lot of possibilities, feeling that, I forget which statesman said that everything that's wrong with our country can be fixed by everything that is right with our country. Well, you apply the same thing to a business. Everything that's wrong with a business can be fixed by everything that's right with the business, but we have to have our head in the right place. So I think that there are some emotions that are very supportive in people making a good decision. But interestingly enough, when someone is feeling those emotions of confidence or, being open, all those good kinds of things, do you think that makes them more or less interested in the facts and the figures and all the technical information? When you're feeling those resourceful emotions, do you want the information or what? How?
No, no.
Okay, tell us about that, Edie.
Well, I mean, we feel so defined in our confidence and in our hope and our belief that there's just an energy to move forward. And I think facts actually feel like an obstacle. And then I'm wondering, are things like confidence and hope, that's part of a belief system. Are those really emotions? I get a little confused if it's a mindset, but is it really an emotion?
Yeah, are you feeling confident? What does that really mean? It is on the list of emotions. So let me explain, and this is what I was trying to get to in a roundabout kind of a way. And that is that if you look at radial trends on the change grid, there is going to be a change in focus on what kinds of information we begin to allow into our thinking. When we are in the center of the change grid, inside of this green circle, we have an appreciation for the three main types of information that come involved when we're making a decision. That information is, how is this going to affect me, or where do I fit into the whole equation, etc. The second thing is, how are others impacted by this decision? How do they factor into it? How do they contribute to it? And then the third element is just raw information, pure logic, facts, figures, data, etc. When you are inside of this green circle, you are in place in the change grid where you are able, and not only able to, but naturally oriented to seeking out and utilizing all three sources of information. So you want to know what's going on with you, self-awareness. You want to be aware of others. You want to be aware of what's actually really, truly happening in terms of facts and figures. As we move outside of that green circle, but between the green circle and the red circle, we're now entering what we kind of refer to as second degree imbalance. So we're not perfectly balanced. That's only the center of the change grid. Even inside of this green circle, we've got 1 degree of imbalance happening. We're stepping off center one way or another. Now we get out here at second degree imbalance. Now, depending on what direction you are looking at, it might express itself in very different sorts of ways, but nevertheless, there is a consistent thing that's happening, and that is that appreciation for and utilization of data and information is starting to be set aside. Now it's on a continuum. It's not, oh, we're here, get rid of it. Nope. We slowly but most surely, as we move away from the center of the change grid in any direction, we start to lose whatever emphasis we're placing on the raw data, the core facts and figures. So now when we're between the green and the red, what we have remaining are how this is going to affect ourselves and how this implies to others. And so, Edie, you're right. When people are very confident, they may have that confidence overrule some fact or figure that someone who's a little bit more in grid might want to be sharing. And if we look at these 16 energies, you know that we have a lot of amiable drivers that are inside of that green circle, a lot of emotional intelligence going on here. Well, if you get somebody else on the team who's between the green circle and the red circle, who's kind of dismissing that fact because they're so confident and so, energized or whatever, so driven for whatever reasons might be happening, they may ignore that or deny whatever that piece of information happens to be. And then, just to finish this whole dynamic, as they move beyond the red circle, and now they're in one of the danger zones, what happens to their concern about others? What happens to it? Are they really concerned about others when they're that
Not
far up?
really.
Not really, right?
Not
Now it's
really.
all about me, 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 me. How's this going to affect me? What's this going to do as far as I'm concerned? And so I think it's important for you guys to always remember that as we're looking at the emotions. The home of logic, appreciation for facts, figures, etc., is actually a small area of the change grid, relatively speaking. It's inside of the green circle. We would even say this, and imagine this, so bask in this for just a moment. You would think that anyone who's plotting in this analytical energy would always have an appreciation for the facts and figures and details and all that, but that's not true. Now, they'll say they are, but what happens in the languaging of an analytical energy as they leave this little bit that's in regular, the kind of the expressive analytical has an appreciation for the facts and figures. What happens as we start to move further and further down grid? Any thoughts?
Well, they have more and more confidence about their positioning, so they pay less attention.
Right.
They're not as interested in the facts and figures anymore because confidence is overriding it.
Yeah, and so again, now that's happening out grid with the bravado. It's also happening down grid, but the dynamic is a little bit different. And so I'll just share this one little bit from the training. The big difference is that the person who's out grid says they're very confident, walks in a way that conveys they're very confident, and they'll this person who's this far down grid is kind of resting on their laurels a little bit. They continue to believe that they are still confident because at one point they really were. So remember, as we move into power apathy and apathy, that perception of control moves from being in control in power into having an assumption of control. You assume you're still in control when you're in power apathy. And when you get down into apathy, you could actually be suffering from an illusion of control. To remind you about another dynamic on another layer. If we go back to that adult learning process, they go from being an unconscious incompetent, which is in this in-grid quadrant. Then they become aware they don't know something. They move up grid. They work high on developing the competency, so they end up moving down grid, or rather out grid, but down grid also. But then once they have the competency, they continue to do it. It becomes more and more automatic. Sooner or later, it becomes unconscious. So this person who is analytical, again, assumes that all the facts and figures have remained the same, but they're becoming unconscious. They're not paying attention to how things might be different than they were a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, pre-pandemic, whatever it happens to be. So that's probably the big difference. The person who's slightly out grid continues to be in control and continues to work hard to maintain that control. The person who's down grid just says, or they assume they're still in control. So is that analytical energy? Yes. Is it an appreciation for the information? Well, what do you guys think? Yay, nay? New information, old information? Yeah. So these are the, yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking as you were presenting that, this clip I saw on this guy teaching on sales, and he was in essence talking about what you're discussing here and was trying to get folks to understand and respect having a good balance between the facts in the sales process with a customer, having a good balance of presenting and towards facts and emotion. Saying that if you sold strictly on the facts being the features and benefits of your product and ignoring the emotional side of the cell,
That's right.
that could be problematic. And if you do just the opposite, it could be problematic. And so he was suggesting trying to find that balance.
Exactly right. That's about developing the value equation. And ultimately, the value equation tends to lean more to the emotional side of things, to the logical side of things. So it's great that the product offers X. Well, what value do you bestow upon that X? And it's not at all unusual for someone to say, well, peace of mind. Is one of those things. Well, peace of mind is most definitely, I guess we could call it a bit of a state, but there's an emotional element that's very strong in there as well.
Yeah.
And so I bring this all up just to say that going back to the whole discussion about emotional intelligence, if you really want to talk about emotional reasoning, the ChangeGrid would give you this caution that emotional reasoning is only going to occur well here as they've described it. So in that bit of an amiable driver, there is still enough of an appreciation for the information, the data, et cetera. Again, remember, to end up where that amiable driver is, they only perceive their ability as 6, 7, 8. Maybe, touching on 9. So they're still learning. They're still students of the subject matter. So they're still appreciating. They're gathering. Remember, one of the hallmarks of power is that people in power are in an aggressive information gathering mode. Well, as we move away from the center of the ChangeGrid, we go beyond this green little border. You can certainly expect to see a shedding of interest or diminishing of interest. Thoughts about that? Yeah? No? Nay? We? All right, so if I look at their little, they said expansive versus limited, I would say to you that people who are in the center of the ChangeGrid have, what do you think, more likely to be expansive in their decision making, and as we move further out grid, up grid, down grid, in grid, more limited in decision making? Would that be?
I would think so.
Yeah, anyone? We got some thoughts around that? Because we have to look at the extreme then and say that would mean that a leader who's a driven driver is in no position to be making decisions because they're not factoring in others and they're not necessarily factoring in the full range of data that's available to them. They could be very selective and just jumping on that and to, hell with all the other people that happen to be involved.
So they're more weighted towards emotion in terms of their own emotion, whether it's the fear or the anger.
The fear, the anger, the thing about the person who's in the outgrid danger zone is they quest power above all. And so if you try to interfere with them having the power they want, they'll respond with anger, and they'll fight. Remember, this is where the fight all occurs. And so I think that's what we're kind of getting to here, is that don't think that just because someone is a C-suite executive that they have good decision-making abilities. Forget about great, forget even about adequate. They could really be very bad because this particular spot on the ChangeGrid is undermining their ability to factor in how others are involved. And by the way, that also means how others could be mobilized in a useful kind of way. And certainly this idea about decision making, including the information is readily available. That's just not there. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts about this? Yeah, and again, I know we seem to be talking a great deal about what's happening outgrid. Well, that's because most of our businesses are all focused around dealing with people that are in outgrid. They're trying to accomplish something one way or another. Sometimes we have to deal with upgrid situations they find themselves in because something has happened that's disrupted whatever their plan happens to be. And sometimes we need to deal with these downgrade energies because this is where all the untapped potential lies. And those resources could very well well be reapplied, remobilized, redeployed to help whoever's trying to make something happen, this driver thing happen. So now to Boris's observation, again, this is the bull in the china shop, and this bull in the china shop is having an impact on his people, his or her people, will be gender neutral here. And that behavior that could be happening too far out grid could be driving some of the team members into the upgrid danger zone, where they're being very reactive and just, fleeing as quickly as they can. Or it could be driving other people into the downgrade danger zone, where their whole objective is to simply fly under the radar, and just kind of don't do anything that upsets anybody, just stay with the status quo. This too shall change. And so neither one of those situations is really helpful to it. And again, because of the energy of being this far out grid, what are they doing to the people who do have something to say, that do have something to contribute? Is it encouraging that behavior or discouraging that behavior?
And T, I think it can also push folks to that out grid.
Ooh, tell us about that.
And if someone has a particular emotional reaction to that leader, it could wind up pushing them that far out grid, and then you have conflict. So you don't have folks, moving to upgrid or downgrid, but I could see where that person could actually draw folks outgrid along with them, and then you've got verbal altercations and
so let's add a little bit more to that story. We've got someone who's behaving in an outgrid danger zone. And by the way, let me be very clear about this. Not all people that are running businesses are necessarily this far outgrid. This just happens to be the problem child we're talking about right now. Well-run businesses are still run by people that have an outgrid energy, but they can appreciate the data, and they can appreciate other people. They're more here. They're not in the danger zone. But so imagine we have this danger zone person who's the bull in the china shop. They've moved a whole bunch of people too far upgrid, a whole bunch of other people too far downgrid, and they're silencing the people that are still working hard, trying to make good things happen. So someone else comes along and says, you know what? I also have some power, and I have the power to contain you. And so this is where Boris was talking about how the chairman of the board of directors, might come along and fire whoever this person happens to be. Well, for that person to come forward and fire them, you have to believe that that person is ready, willing, and able to go toe-to-toe energetically with this person who's too far down grid. They probably also have some sort of legal counsel they've already talked to or may be present during all this. And they probably also have HR or someone like that present, because obviously this dynamic could lead to retribution. And the organization would be smart to do anything it can do to protect itself from whatever that retribution or that revenge might be. Yes.
Gee, I got a question. Maybe I'm completely off with this, but in my mind, what I'm looking at this change grid, and I see that center point, the purple dot, to me, that there's actually another dot directly polar opposite behind it. What we're measuring here on the change grid is perception. And on the other end of that spectrum is reality, right? And to the degree that perception is reality, that people will do what they are perceiving, but the actual reality may not be the case.
Correct.
That's where I think there's an interesting dynamic here.
Yeah, so let me add a little bit of change grid flesh to that. There is two different realities. There is the reality of truth. There's also the reality in quotes, which is really just other people's perceptions. So when you're talking about real, absolute truth, it lives in the center of the change grid. That's where it is. It's the only place on the change grid where a complete, open appreciation and acknowledgement for all things that are truly truth can really occur. As you move away from the center of the change grid in any direction, you're going to question that reality, or you're going to argue against that reality, or you're going to some way or another just try to avoid it, minimize it, whatever. The sooner the change, you got to go like, oh, no, no, no. This is core in how we operate. We want to know whatever the truth of the truth is. Now, what a lot of organizations deal with, and a lot of us on the call have dealt with our fair share of organizations that are struggling. I mean, they're, if anything, they're our livelihood. But there is this also reality, again, in air quotes, that is nothing more than somebody else's perception being presented as reality. And so that reality is not in the center of the change grid. That's happening a little bit elsewhere, depending on the motives of the individual. So there's some pretending that's going on. There's some agenda manipulation that might be going on and all that. But so I guess that's the big question. And hopefully all of you recognize there is a big difference between truly truthful truthness and people's reality, which is nothing more than their perceptions packaged as such. Yes, no, agree, yeah. Yeah. So to Boris's point, yes, lo and behold, there is another little teeny tiny dot behind that that purple spot. And that would be the place of the complete and total truth. I guess one real question, though, for all of us is that, is it even possible for anyone in a business setting or any kind of a human endeavor to ever know the complete truth about everything, you know, every aspect of everything that happens to be going on? Or do they simply have more truth than others may have, and they are less likely to substitute voids in their understanding of the real truth with their perceptions of what could be, should be, ought to be, etc.?
So the analysis I'll make here is my teenage son, right? He thinks that he knows everything about everything.
Yeah.
And I think the older you get, the more mature you become, you start to realize how much you actually don't know in the real world.
Right.
I think it's almost impossible to know everything and what the actual real truth of some subject matter is.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't think that that's what you need to aspire to. I think what you need to aspire to is being as close to that point as possible.
That's right.
So that you can make the best determination with the facts at hand.
Yeah, and then that gives rise to the question, where on the change grid is someone most likely to do what you've just described? And we certainly know it's not in a danger zone.
Right.
And we certainly know that it's not going to be done as well, it might be done to a certain degree, but as well between the green and the red circle. It's inside of that green circle where we can now give at least equal weight to what information might be coming from that. And if I look at their definition about emotional reasoning, they are saying that you're combining it with facts and technical information. So we want to have that balanced approach to whatever that happens to be. Now, here's something that I talk about when we talk about the 6 different decision-making steps in the path of self-discovery, but one of them is this idea about the current situation. Who is the keeper of the corporate truth? So many people inside of a corporate setting could be considered to be keepers of at least some aspect of the corporate truth. And when they come to a meeting, they're the ones who come to the meeting with the ability to represent the truth should the opportunity arise to do precisely that. Well, they tend to be the amiable drivers, because when you really are looking at facts and figures and data, there's not a whole lot of well, my mom always said you can't have an opinion about fact because it doesn't change a damn thing. And so her whole idea was like, no, truth is truth, reality is reality. And so these people bring it forward, but they are very likely to be the messenger who gets killed, the person who gets shut down. And so who inside of an organization might be coming to a decision-making situation as a keeper of the corporate truth? What do you guys think? What kinds of roles inside of an organization might? HR could be there as the keeper of a corporate truth. Now they have their realm of what the corporate truth is. Who else could be coming?
CFO.
The CFO who's coming and going like, this is what the numbers are. So, so they might be there as a keeper of the corporate truth. And there could be other people as well. So like someone's been doing perhaps some marketing research, competitive analysis, that sort of a thing. There could be some data that would be coming forward from there. Maybe it's from R&D that's coming along. Maybe it's a legal advisor, but there are plenty of roles inside of an organization that are the keepers of the corporate truth. And there they are, they come to the meeting. Now, if they've got people who are between the green and the red circle, maybe a little bit upgrade because there's something urgent going on, maybe a little bit downgrade because it's more of these like long-term strategic planning kinds of things, or maybe right here in the middle, moving things forward. So different energies can still exist between that green and red circle. These people still appreciate what those people are bringing to the table. So they might not be thinking in there because, again, between the green and the red circle, they've kind of shed their focus. That's really not a fair verb. It's not so much that they've shared it as much as they've kind of like moved it a bit to a back burner. So it's just not where their thoughts right now are about themselves, other people, and other people could be employees, stakeholders, shareholders, customers, who knows who these others are, but they're very interested in thinking about, okay, gotta deal with those others, gotta impress them, gotta utilize them, gotta blah, blah, blah. And then they still have all their own personal stuff going on because you always got your personal stuff going on.
So T, if I may, on the scenario you just painted regarding the corporate truths, it's been my experience that that's what creates the tension in organizations, because each of those disciplines of the organization that we just described come with their perspective of truth for that organization.
Mhm.
Be it the CFO saying, these are the numbers we got to hit, and maybe not giving regard to how that impacts the employee population. And then you've got the HR leader in there saying, well, no, we got to make sure that we're valuing, our people. And you get all of these different disciplines coming with their own view of the truth.
Right.
And some, so how that gets worked out, I think, is what becomes critical. But I know that it creates that tension within organizations, and perhaps whoever has the power is the one that wins that battle. But definitely.
Well, how about this? The person who's got all the power, this outgrid person, I don't know if they win the battle as much as they shut everything down. Because the conflict still exists if it hasn't gotten worse because of this dynamic. And so again, we look in here, and I always want to, with my clients, I'm always reminding them, the truth is not something that people think is correct. The truth is the truth. And some people hold it. They know it. They're the keepers of the truth. There are a lot of people out there who will say that X is true, but X is really nothing more than their perception, their interpretation, their agenda item, whatever it is, packaged as the truth. There's a lot of that happens when you go outside of that green circle. And then you've also got people that are in the outgrid danger zone, or any danger zone, that would either be outright deniers of the truth, or people that are focusing in on only certain elements of the truth and not factoring in other things that are truthful, which could render their truth a puzzle instead of a given sort of a thing. And so this is what I really think is the source. I think, was it Tim? Did you say this is really what conflict inside an organization is all about?
Yes.
And who wins it? The truth is that the organization will never win this until the truth prevails.
I think what Tim is bringing up is really very important, because it's the dynamic and the difference, I think, between having a real qualified CEO leader and somebody that is incapable of leading this organization.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And again, just going back to the emotional intelligence map, we've already said this driven driver, this person who's this far out grid, they're not exhibiting emotional intelligence. They either don't have it, never have had it, or they can't access it or are choosing not to access it because they'd rather push, 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 the bull in the china shop. Well, sooner or later, this bull is going to cut themselves off from the truth because you be one of those corporate keepers of the truth. How willing are you to share the truth if you just know you're going to be attacked because of it? And by the way, the attack could be brutal. They could fire you altogether. And I used to make this joke. I'd say, you know, people who are the keepers of the truth or really understand the kinds of things that all of us understand are very often misunderstood in an organization, and we get selectively eliminated or we just choose to leave. Don't feel sorry for us. We become consultants. And so you wouldn't listen to us when we were on staff. Maybe now you're more likely to listen to us because we're very expensive. So you get the idea. It's like the truth ultimately must prevail. Otherwise, the organization is going to struggle. Because you know what? No matter what this outgrid energy is fantasizing, it's not reality. And sooner or later, they're going to miss something or cause something that's even more problematic. So, yep.
So T,
But, but
the quadrant where your cursor is right now, if you move just to the left of that, that intersection right there of the yellow X, that to me, that box just to the left of that looks like the optimal place for
it
a
is.
CEO to live.
It is.
Then encompassing all of the clarity within the green circle area, right? He sees the picture the way it is, and he's got just enough outgrid energy to make the valuable decisions he's got to make.
That's right. We would say that anyone who's running an organization, anyone in a true leadership position, should kind of work to remain here at 9-9. So they're a balanced driver. Depending on the circumstances, we want them to also have the ability to step one plotting point in any direction. So for example, if I'm right here, but a decision needs to be made and we need to get off of our butt and we need to execute, we need to do that, it's okay for that leader to step out here to 10-10. Now they're not in the danger zone, but they have stepped into that driven driver energy. Now there are always three energies. This is actually the amiable driven driver. So they haven't forgotten that people are involved, but they may very well and very appropriately step further out grid and say, everybody, the time for us to get going is now. We got to do this. And, you know, I hate to be the one who is, you know, wielding the power, but once in a while, if that's what I got to do to get done what needs to get done, I'm willing to do that. But you know, no, I appreciate you, I care about you, etc. They're not this bull in the china shop. That's exclusively outside of this vertical line. But on the line, could be good things happening. I'll give you another example. So let's say that rather than stepping out, I need someone who's going to be a little bit more enthusiastic and motivating. Well, it'd be okay for them to step up and to the right by 1 or 2 points in order to make that occur. So be a little bit more of an expressive driven driver, a driven, you know, there's a whole lot of words we could use right along this line because it's about a balance between those energies. So it's okay for them to have this 9-9 as the epicenter for strong, high quality leadership behaviors. But sometimes we need that leader to say, we need to say to the leader, buddy, you got to slow down and take a look at the facts. So we need you to exhibit a little bit more analytical energy so you really understand what's really going on. Well, that's just a slight step downgrade. We need them to become more compassionate and understanding because something has happened that's very much negatively impacted people's lives. Like right now, this whole COVID thing that's been going on. We needed that leadership to exhibit a bit more amiable energy than perhaps it has in the past because the circumstances require it. So Boris, I could go all the way around all those 8 little spots and say that we want these to be in the accessible wheelhouse of that CEO's behavior or that leader's behavior, because sometimes They need a little bit more of one of these energies or a combination of these energies. Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Thoughts, comments about what I've just explained? Yeah.
You know, a long time ago, not a long time ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I wrote an article called "You Can Only Lead as Fast as They Can Follow." And to me, that's the truth. And it's the amiable energy that really, I think, is key in getting people to open back up, consider the facts, look at the situation. You know, the only way to speed somebody up is to educate them.
Educate, motivate. This is what you need to do. And aren't those really key skills for a good quality leader? I think that even in pride-based leadership, what are one of the things we're always saying? The success of a leader is completely in the hands of the follower. So I don't care if your positional title includes the word leader. That doesn't make you one. It just gives you an opportunity to serve as one. So ultimately, it is the followers who are going to make or break any and all leaders, so-called leaders, or it's the followers that are going to make or break that entrepreneur. It's the followers that are going to make or break whatever this real outcome is. And if any of these outgrid people think otherwise, they have no idea how much power these other energies have to undermine everything that they want to do. And so do I need an amiable driver, or are there an analytical driver to plot and scheme how they're going to attack you legally? And, do I need an expressive driver energy who's going to figure out how to go slash your tires, get you into a situation where you're going to misbehave and get framed for whatever? You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of like, do not mess with the followers. Okay. Good. My thing just said my internet was unstable, but I can still hear all you guys. So good.
You're fading.
Am I? I know.
Yeah.
But with 3 minutes left to go, hopefully we'll be okay. All right. So as much as I wanted to get through these other two on self-management and positive influence, whoever would have thought that we can talk for an hour about each one of these competencies. But I think it's really important for anyone who's working with C-suite, anyone who is working with emotional intelligence, to understand what we've been talking about on these calls. So should you factor in emotions and feelings into decisions as they're being made? Yes, to the degree that those feelings and emotions are helpful, useful, enhancing, whatever word you want to use to describe them. But we don't want these damaging, distorting emotions to be running the operation. Okay. Comments, questions, thoughts? No? All right, well, we only have 2 minutes left, so I dare say we're going to be talking about this. It's so funny, but you guys keep coming back, so I imagine you're enjoying these conversations. So, feel free to give me some reinforcement on that. This idea about self-management and positive influence, what I like about that is that, to Boris's point, this self-management one is going to be of great value at the individual level. So how do they carry themselves? How do they present themselves? And there's intelligent ways to do that, and there's stupid ways to do that. And then positive influence, now we're talking really about what leadership is all about. Keep in mind the word leader implies that someone is in front of a whole bunch of other people. Are you just standing there, or are you going someplace? So there is this assumption or presumption that all leadership involves change. So there's movement that's going to be happening. Well, how are we going to make that happen? By empowering people, by being indifferent? So I think this is going to be very interesting to see how this resonates with our understanding of where leadership, true leadership, actually occurs on the change grid, where good self-management naturally occurs. Okay, so you guys have yourself a wonderful weekend. By our next call, we will be the proud owners of a brand new router, because we've kind of tried to fix everything else. So time to replace the router. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye for now. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.